I am Mary Frances Early, the first black graduate of the University of Georgia. And watch me
on Lessons
with Miss Lee.
Yes! Best shout out ever!
I'm Robin Roberts, and this is Lessons with Mrs. Lee.
I don't have any regrets because I wouldn't be the person I am today.
One thing that I knew also because of my environment, I didn't want to stay in New York City.
On the positive side, the lessons that I learned because I was able to win.
Hey, I'm Jasmine Guy, and you know what? I studied hard. I still study hard, and I'm 50.
Lessons
with Mrs. Lee.
I'm Judge Hatchett, and you are hereby ordered to watch Lessons with Mrs. Lee.
Lessons with Mrs. Lee, journalist, educator, from news leader to media instructor. And here's your host, Keisha Lee.
I would like to start by saying why I invited Miss Early. I invited her for many, many reasons, but the most important one, it was for selfish reasons. I wanted to be in the same place, in the same space with a living legend. So I'm so excited that she agreed to come. The second reason was I wanted her to share her story with all of you. And I wanted you to hear a firsthand account of why education is so important and all of the obstacles that she had to overcome to get her degree from the University of Georgia. And the third reason I wanted her to come was to give a charge to all of us, to the adults and the students, of what we need to do moving forward. Miss Early has done her work, and it is time for the rest of us to take up the torch and move forward in advancing our world and making it a better place. So Miss Early, we salute you today, and we are going to spoil you rotten. That's our job. Before we move on in our program, we are going to hear a musical selection from Dr. Morris. Before we have him come, I couldn't really put into words how excited I was for Miss Early to come today, and so I wrote a poem, and I'd like to share that with everyone. It's rather short, and so I just wanted to sum up what she means to me and what her efforts have meant to many. And so I'm an artist, so I'm sensitive, so please open your heart to me. And the name of my poem is called I Owe a Debt. And it goes as such. I owe a debt to Emma, my great-grandmother, affectionately called Big Mama. To Edith, my grandmother, who birthed my mother. To Evelyn, who gave me life, my best friend, who I owe everything for her sacrifices, her sternness, her stillness, and her steadfastness in the face of all of the storms of life. I owe a debt. I owe a debt to Charlene for the desegregation of my alma mater, the University of Georgia, and for her dedication to giving a voice to the voiceless through journalism, which was my chosen field. For the door she opened to a quality education for many more generations to come. I owe a debt. I owe a debt to Mary Frances for coming back home south to take up the torch of integration, for leaving her comfortable life up north at the University of Michigan, for her calmness in the face of bigotry and racism, for being the first, yes, the first African-American graduate of the University of Georgia, for her patience when her place in history was ignored and forgotten for over 30 years. I owe a debt, and because I owe this debt, I will never give up. I will never quit, I will never stop, and I refuse to be denied. Because I owe a debt that I can never truly repay, I will spend the rest of my days trying to pay it forward. Thank you.
One night on January the 11th, I was sitting watching a little black and white television, and I saw this riot that was going on. These people were throwing incendiary bombs, and they were throwing rocks at this dormitory, and I knew that that was where Charlene Hunter was residing. Well, finally, they quelled the riot, and there were Ku Klux Klanners there also. But finally, when they got the riot stopped, they expelled the two students or suspended them, Charlene and Hamilton. He was not living on campus, but they sent them back to Atlanta saying that it was for their own safety. And as I sat there, I was in my 4th year teaching. I was 24 years of age. I said, they can't do that. Those are my fellow Turner Right students, and I've got to do something. So at the time in Atlanta, there was picketing going on. They picketed the stores, they picketed lunch counters, they picketed the movies, anything. The students from the Atlanta University Center, the black students. I couldn't do that because I was an employee of the state, and they would have fired me. And I love teaching, just as Miss Lee loves teaching and all the other teachers here. You love teaching because you come into contact with young people, bright young people like you, who you know you can have a hand in helping to mold if they would listen. So I told my mom, I'm going to transfer from the University of Michigan, where I had been going to school in the summer. I'm going to transfer because they need help. They are undergraduates. I'm a graduate student, and somebody needs to open that door. My mom said to me, you don't want to do that because things are pretty tough down in that area. My mother was born in Monroe, Georgia, which was just a little ways from Athens. She knew about 4 blacks who had been killed, murdered, not lynched the usual way, but they'd been murdered in 1948. She had never told me this story, but I said to my mom, I have to go. I cannot stand on the sidelines. And I thought back about Henry McNeil Turner. I thought, if he could be that courageous in 1868, 93 years later, I can too. And so I decided I would transfer. And she said, finally, I will support you if that's what you want to do. You know how mothers are. They will support you. Grandmothers do. But at any rate, I sent a letter asking for admission. And within 3 days, I got the forms back to complete. And they asked me to send my transcripts from Clark College and from the University of Michigan, where I was doing summer study. In 1962, I took a leave of absence from my teaching job, went back to the University of Georgia, and I went during the summer of '62, and I got my degree. I want you to see the first diploma that was awarded to any black in Georgia.
Welcome to this edition of Lessons with Mrs. Lee. I have a living legend on the show today, Dr. Mary Frances Early. She is the first graduate, the first African-American graduate of the University of Georgia. I am so thrilled that she agreed to share her story with us today. Welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm delighted to be here.
Miss Early has such an interesting story, one that really touches our heart. So we're going to kind of go back through all of the things that led up to you being that first African-American to get a degree from UGA. Let's start with what really stands out to me is that investigative report that was done on you and your entire family. Can you tell us some of the details?
Well, I didn't even know this investigative report existed until the year 2000, when a student, a UGA student who was doing a report, brought it to me and said, have you seen this? And I said, what? No, I haven't. And I don't know what questions she asked because she was interviewing me. But because I was so, enraged at the questions that were asked. The investigative report was simply one of the ruses that the officials, including UGA, tried to, discredit me from being able to be accepted.
Let's talk about, you were isolated in where you stayed on campus. You were ignored by your fellow students. You were ignored in the dining hall, in the classroom, isolated in your quarters. Can you take us back to what that felt like to be so isolated?
It was painful to me because I'm a naturally gregarious person. I like to talk. When I eat better when I have someone to talk with and eat. And none of that was true. Sometimes I wonder, is this really me? You have to look in the mirror. Say, is this really me? My third day on campus was my 25th birthday. And I had been ignored all day in class. Students wouldn't say anything to you and move away from you as far as they could get. And I was feeling really down. But when I got back to the dorm, Mrs. Porter said you had a call from Dr. Popovich wanting to know if you want to have hot dogs across the street at the Presbyterian Student Center. I didn't know where that was. I said, well, how am I going to get over there? She said, well, Dr. Popovich is going to pick you up. Dr. Popovich was a speech teacher, and he had written me a letter of welcome, the only letter of welcome I got before I came to campus. He came, and I said, sure, because it was my birthday. You know, I thought, yeah, I hadn't eaten with anybody since I'd been down there.
Wow.
So he came and got me and walked me across the street because it wasn't very far, sort of diagonally across the street. And Corky King, his name is Hardin, Hardin, but everybody called him Cork. Corky King, the Presbyterian student minister, and his wife, Mary Lowell, and they had 2 twin daughters. They were babies. Greeted me at the door and told me, come in, we have some hot dogs in the backyard. Well, I didn't know it, but when I got to the backyard, they had a birthday cake there with my name engraved.
A surprise party.
A surprise party, sort of like today.
Yes.
I was so overcome, I couldn't stop crying because I thought, these people don't even know me, and yet they are so kind because somebody found out, I don't know who, that it was my birthday. And that was the most special birthday I've ever had because it came, it was a surprise.
And it came at a time you were probably pretty
and
down.
I needed that at the time also.
Awesome.
But Reverend King was, he and his wife went to the dining hall with me the day after I had the lemons thrown.
Okay, let's back up to the lemons incident. You know, so you had that surprise birthday party, and thank goodness that was such a positive thing and a lift that you needed.
Yes.
But it wasn't always great when it came to eating on campus.
No.
And so tell us about the dining hall incident and the lemons.
Okay, I went to Snelling Dining Hall. They didn't have all those fancy dining halls they have now. And I got in line because it was a cafeteria, style eating. And, I felt something hit my back, and I turned around, and it was a lemon slice, lemon wedge. And then they started coming fast and furiously, and I realized there were students sitting at the table taking the iced tea taking the lemon slices off the iced tea glasses, throwing at me. And the closer I got to the front of the line where the serving trays were, one of them fell into a serving tray, and at that point, the manager, whoever she was, came out and said, stop. And they stopped. But I was so angry. When they had cafeteria tables, of course, and if I sat down at a table where any of them was seated, they would get up and leave. So I was so angry about the lemons throwing that I called Corky King and told him what had happened, and I said to him, we've got a little kitchenette in our room, and I'm just going to eat there. He said, no, that's what they want you to do.
That's it.
He said, Mary Lyle and I will go to lunch with you tomorrow. You're going to go back. And They went to lunch with me the following day. No lemons were thrown. And from that point on, I still went. Not with them, but I went. Because it gave me the courage, I don't have to get upset. These are people who are acting juvenile. But, we are human beings. And no matter how we say we're strong or we're courageous or whatever, we're still human beings. And it hurts. But I still knew that since I selected myself to go, I've got to go through with it. I'm not going to give up. That's right. I'm not going to give up.
So talk about the time that you were trying to go to the library. You were trying to go to the library, which is an essential piece to the educational process, is going to the library, doing your research, having quiet time to study, and you were simply trying to do that. And tell me what occurred.
It was a beautiful night. It was a summer night. It's always hot in Athens in the summertime. But it was dark. And it was an uphill, going to the library. The main library is an uphill climb. And I'd gotten up, and I was approaching the steps. And I heard these boys were standing there. And at first, they were standing all around the steps. And one of them said, "I smell a dog." And the other one said, "That's not a dog. That's an N-word." I thought, oh boy, here we go again.
That's it.
And then they spread themselves across the top steps and linked arms and just glared at me. And I thought, I'm going to be the bulldog I'm supposed to be.
Yes.
I'm going to go through that line if they don't move. And as I was really angry. And as I got to the top of the steps, they broke rank and ran away laughing. It wasn't funny to me because that was not a prank. That was harassment. And I did not get much studying done that night, but I went because if you're in school, you have to go to the library.
That's it. It's essential.
So things like that, they're bothersome, but you just have to, what is it people say, you have to suck it up?
That's it.
The problem was that you never knew what to expect.
That's it.
You didn't know whether you're going to go out and your car is vandalized, or if you're going to go out and they're going to throw rocks at you. You just didn't know what to expect.
And all the things that happened to you.
Yeah.
Your car was vandalized with racial slurs.
Yes.
There were rocks thrown at you.
Yes.
So why could you take the pressure? What is in you that made you stay, Miss Early, and say,
What choice do we have? And I have to admit, you spoke about the rocks. I was going to the post office because no computers, no cell phone. You gotta write or you gotta call. Didn't have a telephone in my room, so I was going to the post office to let my mom know in a written letter that I would not be home the next weekend because I had some work to do. And these guys were across the street, and they started. Well, first of all, they started throwing racial taunts. And I just ignored that because I never let anybody define me what they thinking. They can say what they want, but they can't. They say sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. Well, they do. Anyway, I ignored them, and I guess that made them upset. They wanted me to react to them. So they started throwing these little rocks. And one of them hit me, no, it was on this side, underneath my glasses. And I said, they could put my eyes out. I stooped down and I picked up the rock and I threw it back at them. I wasn't throwing at anybody in particular, and I knew I wasn't going to hit anybody.
But you were defending yourself.
I was letting them know I am not as nonviolent as I may look. I was young then. I'm old now, but I was young then, and I was not just going to let them not hit me. That you don't have to take that. But I thought, I've been going to Dr. King's church. Every time I go home, he and his father alternated preaching on Sundays. So I would always go when he was preaching. His dad preached too long, so. I like to hear him talk about nonviolence and love for all men and the brotherhood of men. And so the next Saturday when I went home, I went to his church that Sunday. And I asked to speak with him after church. And so I said to him, Dr. King, I'm sorry, I was not nonviolent. There was an incident on campus, and I told him what happened. And he said, don't worry, Mary Frances, I would have done the same thing. And of course, it made me feel better, but I didn't believe him.
Yes.
Because, I mean, I don't know. I think about all those students who sat at the lunch counters and let people stuff cigarettes out on their head and pour hot coffee on them. There's just so much the human spirit can actually endure. But John Lewis is still alive today, and they did all kinds of things to him.
I like your spirit. You know, you're always described with this quiet dignity, but through your stories, I learned there's a time to stand up, speak up, and even a time to shut up. So in your interview for admissions, you shut up because it was unfair and insulting, but you knew that was not the time.
Right.
There are other times that you spoke up, but with folks throwing rocks at you, how do you distinguish when it's time to stand up and say no more?
You instinctively know, because bullies, and there are bullies nowadays with kids, bullies will continue if you just continue to ignore them. You have to stand up and say, look, I'm not going to stand for this because I don't deserve it and you have no right. But I think you have to be discreet in how you respond. Now, had I picked up a really big rock and thrown at them and hit somebody, I would have regretted it for the rest of my life.
That's it.
But what I did was to let them know, I'm not going to just be your punching bag. I'm going to retaliate because you need to stop. I mean, I was a graduate student. They were probably undergraduates. I have no idea because I don't know who they were.
Okay.
But they were students.
Tell us why you decided, how you decided to transfer from the University of Michigan and go to the University of Georgia.
Well, I told you about the looking at the riot and the fact that my mom did not want me to go because of the potential for danger. And I thought about all of the students that were marching. They were being jailed over and over again. In fact, my principal, Mr. Long's daughters, Wilma Long and Carolyn Long, they were two of Charlene Hunter's best friends. Found that out later. But they were constantly being jailed. They were students at Clark or at Morehouse or at, there were men too. Clark, Morehouse, Morris Brown, even the ITC, Interdenominational Theological Seminary. And they were persistent. They would not stop. They marched. They wrote a proclamation, asking, I forget what it was called. Lonnie King, who was a classmate of mine in elementary school, he and Julian Bond were the leaders of that. And there was one woman, and I can't remember her name. She was at Spelman. But those students, I thought, here they are out there showing us that we don't want this treatment anymore. We want freedom, and we want it now. And here I sit, I'm teaching, I enjoy teaching, but what can I do? I can go to school because I had been a good student, not braggadocio, but I didn't have problems with that. So I thought, this is my weapon. I can go to the University of Georgia and open the graduate door. See, I knew that Horace Ward had been denied in 1950. To go to the law school. They had sent him to the Army to get him out of the way. But he came back and worked, ironically, for Don Hollowell's firm. And he got a chance to work on this case where he wasn't allowed to come in, but Charlene and Hampton were. And I thought, I cannot just stand by and watch other people. I want to be actively involved. And so that's how I made my decision. And I thought again I told you about Henry McNeil Turner, who 93 years before then had the courage to stand up in the Georgia House of Legislature and say, I'm a man. I was elected to this position and I have a right to be here. They did not seat him again, but he had the courage to do it. And those are the people that we liked. Martin Luther King Jr. was one of my heroes. John Lewis, in after then, because I didn't know as much about him, is a hero. Andrew Young, all those icons of. I mean, you can't just sit back and say, well, I'm going to let somebody else do it.
So you finished your course. You made it to the finish line, a little battered, a little bruised, probably more negative experiences than positive. And you graduate the first graduate of the first African American graduate of the University of Georgia, and they forget about you for over 30 years.
Yep.
How did you not become bitter?
Well, I'll go back to the graduation. I was ignored at the graduation itself. But I had 74, I think it was 74, I've heard 74, 76. There were 74 brave souls who came down to witness this, to share in this momentous day, because it was the first time a black had gotten a degree. It wasn't just a graduate degree, it was any degree. And I knew that it was, what do they call, a watershed moment, because University of Georgia would never be the same. It would never be all white again. And, you know, it just made me feel really good. Well, I went back in '64 because there were still too few blacks, and studied through the summer of '67 and got the specialist degree in education. I did not hear anything from the University of Georgia. It was as though I had never been there. No mention. The Atlanta papers, when I graduated, the Atlanta Journal and Constitution were two separate papers, one morning, one evening. And it was not news that a black had finally gotten a degree until a month and a half later. They published an article on September the 26th, 1962, and I received a degree in August 16th, 1962. I didn't understand that. But University of Georgia forgot. And had it not been for one man who is a great researcher, Dr. Maurice Daniels was doing a documentary about Horace Ward, who was the first to try and get into UGA and never did. And he was talking with Donald Hollowell, the attorney, and talking with Jesse Hill, who was a civil rights activist. And they told him, you know, Shar and Ham were not the first to graduate, they were the first to go. Mary Frances Early was third, but she was the first to get a degree. He had never, Dr. Daniels had never heard of me. So he went to the registrar, so he did all of his research. And then he called me, that was 1997. He called me and said, are you the first to get a degree, black to get a degree at University of Georgia? I said, yes, I am. And he introduced himself first. So he said, I'm doing this documentary on Horace Ward, but I want to get some footage with you. And I met him down at the Hurt building, I think. It was supposed to have been at Georgia State, but somehow that didn't work out. And that's online now, my interview, I think, with him from '97. But, and not much has changed. You know, the story really remains the same.
But at 2000, that's when you were officially recognized.
Yeah. See, when they forgot about me, I didn't go around broadcasting. I didn't talk about it at all. When I
you went to work.
I did.
You went to
my
work
career.
and
That's
contributed and continued to contribute. So, Miss Early, my last question for you, what do you want to be remembered for?
To be that I was a foot soldier for justice, because I had grown up in a very restricted, segregated environment, and I wanted to make a contribution, and that's what I feel I did. Yes. I made a contribution. I gave of myself. It wasn't just talking. I went beyond the talk to action, which is what I think everybody ought to do. And I want my legacy to be that I was a participant in that, because I'm proud of it. It was an opportunity, and I was given the privilege of participating.
That's it. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome.
We love you, and we appreciate you. And I know that your legacy will live on. And thank you for continuing to do the good work. But it is our turn now to take up the torch. And so you have heard it firsthand account from the first African American to graduate from the University of Georgia, Mrs. Mary Frances Early. Thank you. I'm Mrs. Lee, and I hope you've learned your lesson. Class dismissed.